You can, in the books that for my classes, a lot of my classes, not this one specifically, but my splinting class and the intro to hand therapy and the tendon class all have patterns in the books, which, you know, are very helpful, kind of time savers. But the way that I learned to make patterns when I started in hand therapy is to just take a paper towel and trace around the patient's hand. And of course, you will get a more tailored fit this way because, you know, the patterns are, you know, more of a one size fits all. And so, you know, it's nice to be able to have the ability to make your own patterns. And this is how I still make them in the clinic, as I just use a paper towel. So I'm just kind of holding it around her hand and just kind of tracing around where I want this splint to fit. And this thumb hole pattern is normally the pattern that I use for gaining flexion of the MP joints of the fingers or flexion of the MP joint of the thumb. And I like it because it secures the splint so that it doesn't shift when you start pulling, because the MP joints require quite a strong pulling force to get the joints, the tissues to move. And just so that's how it's going to fit. And I'm feeling like I should extend it a little bit further just because I need space for my rubber band, so I'm going to just go down a little bit longer than I made this. Now here's the tricky part. So I'm using a splint material called Mano Splint, and I had it pre-printed, but it's only printed on one side, so I have to make sure that the print ends up on the side that's facing out, so it's going to go like that. So, but it's a little hard to trace it with these palm trees here, so I'm going to actually trace it onto the back side, and I think if I'm thinking correctly, it should go like this. That's the problem with the printed material, is you gotta think outside the box. So I'm making a little bit longer than I had made the pattern. And so now I'm going to just heat that splint material. And I would say, you know, I probably make a splint a day, at least. You know, it's a very, very common technique to gain range of motion is low load, long duration stretching. Softening a little bit, but it's not all the way soft yet. Enough to cut it, maybe.
So you use a pretty stiff splint material?
I'm using an 1/8 inch material, and I would say for forearm splinting or for the MP joints, because they require quite a bit of force, that this 1/8 inch material, or an 1/8 inch material, is probably recommended.
1/8 is kind of standard.
Yeah. And there are a lot of different splint materials on the market. In my class on orthotic fabrication splinting class. I go through a variety of materials and kind of the properties and what to watch for and that kind of thing. It can be kind of daunting when you're first starting. You know, there's so many materials on the market. You know, what should I pick? And the material is going to make a difference in terms of, you know, the conformability, your ability to mold it to the patient's hand. Some of them have memory so that if you make a mistake, you can put it back in the water and it'll go back and let you start over again. And so it's kind of a learning process to learn about the different materials and figure out what you like and what's going to work well for you. This is a product that I have just started using within the last 6 months. And I do enjoy it. It's called Splint. I believe it comes out of Belgium. But they do have local distribution. And they seem to be pretty easy to work with. So I'm just becoming familiar with it right now, but I'm liking it. Doesn't show fingerprints, molds pretty well, doesn't stretch too much. And you can have it printed. They've got like 100 different patterns. The only problem with the printing is, you gotta figure out which way is facing out, because I've made the palm trees on the inside before. I'm like, dang, had that upside down backwards. I don't know if that's completely warm yet, but we'll see. So you can,
Easy form, but not as heavy.
correct. Yeah, it molds a little better than easy form.
Feels like an easy form.
Yep, kind of. Yeah, you're right. So let me know if it's too warm. I dried it off first. So I'm going to put her thumb through there. And the wrist, I'm going to pretty much keep in a neutral position if it's just the MP joints that I'm working on. If for some reason it was an extensor tendon, then I may bias the wrist into a little bit of flexion just to get a little bit more of a composite stretch on the extensor tendons. And I always use a wrap to secure the forearm, because now it gives me my hands free to form the splint around the hand. And so on the thumb hole splint, you're going to end up with a kind of a big excess of material, which I just pinch and then fold over to one side. Go fold it this way. And that will contour the splint to the hand. And then on this side, I have to just make sure that this distal edge of the splint is below the distal palmar crease so that her MPs are not restricted coming into flexion. And I roll that distal edge a little bit as well, so that as she pulls against that edge, it's not going to be a sharp edge. And then I'm just going to kind of hold that until it hardens. Meanwhile, I'm going to put in this little piece, which I'm going to use as the outrigger to guide the line of pull. Now, they sell metal outriggers that have a round metal piece that has a bar, and you can rotate the round metal piece to move the bar up or away, closer to or further away from the splint, and you can also push the bar down and up in the round piece, so it gives you a lot of flexibility for adjusting the line of pull, which is great. I do like those and I use them. However, they are fairly expensive, so they add a lot to the cost of the splint. Plus, if you just use one on, patient number 1, and patient number 2 comes in and you need to make another splint, you got to be able to, figure out what you need to do for that patient as well. So I do a lot of making my outriggers out of thermoplastic instead. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And so I do want to just get this splint secured to her. So if it was a patient, of course, I would probably take it off and get these straps in place. Normally when I apply a Velcro strap to the splint base, I would heat the undersurface of the strap to activate the glue, but I'm gonna just place it on right now without doing that, just to save some time.
What do you do with the thumb position? Are you not as concerned?
I'm not worried about it because when the splint's on, she's really not using the hand, right? It's
Yeah.
just a splint that's worn, you know, half an hour to 45 minutes, you know, 3 to 5 times a day. She's not going to really be using the hand when the splint is on, so it doesn't really matter as long as the thumb is, you know, not restricted. Normally I use a 2-inch strap at the wrist, but today I just have 1-inch material, so that's what I'm using. Okay, so now I have the outrigger, or what I'm going to use for the outrigger here.
We call it old school.
Uh-huh. And
We have this discussion with some of the younger people coming out all the time, because the older ones, we make ours.
yeah,
It just, once you get to do it
yeah.
enough, it's just faster for us to do that than for me to get the thing and line it up and put it on.
Yeah.
I can make it faster.
So I just removed that Velcro because I want to put this down, so I probably shouldn't put that on. So I am going to place this, I'm biasing it towards the radial side because as our MP joints flex, they sort of angle towards the radial side. Index finger kind of goes down straight, so I want to make sure that it, you know, is in alignment with the index finger, and then it doesn't have to go all the way over to the small finger side. And I'm just pressing this thermoplastic onto the base of the splint. So that white is going to mess up my little palm tree pattern.
They can draw them on.
Yeah. And then the other thing, when you're making your own outriggers, you need to secure the splint material to the base. So just sticking it on like that isn't going to be a permanent bond. So what I would do is I would remove this and take it over to the heat gun. And basically, I put the heat gun almost right on the splint material to almost melt the splint material. And then you can either have a little cold water to dip your finger into so you don't burn yourself, or you can take the edge of a rubber spatula to seal that permanently in place. And I just did this side, but you would want to go all the way around, so that's completely, well, I'll do this side too because I don't want this to pop off. And a lot of people talk about scoring the splint material or using a solvent to attach one piece of splint material to the other. And I really haven't found a need to do that if I properly heat seal it in place. And now I can put this strap back on. Okay, so now I want to make a cuff, which I'm going to use to pull the finger down. And I use standard fishing line. I don't really like the monofilament line that they sell in the hand therapy catalogs because I find it hard to tie and hard to see. So I usually go to the fishing store and poke around until I find something I like. This one I ordered on Amazon and I'm not all that happy with it because it's a little thin. But you put both ends of the line through both holes of the cuff and then loop it back through itself so that you don't have to tie a knot. And then this is gonna go, so say she's got these 3 fingers that are limited, the index, middle, and ring. So I'm gonna take it on the index finger. I put the center of the cuff over the center of her PIP joint, so I'm not over the joint. So I want the maximum distance from the MP joint for good leverage. And then if she's restricted, say that's how much motion she has. I'm gonna pull down and mark the spot on the outrigger where I need to punch the hole for that finger. Okay, and I might even put a little eye there so I know that's the index finger, because depending upon the range of motion, it might be a little tricky to figure out which hole goes for what finger. This one might come down a little further, so say she has that much motion, so then I'm pulling at a 90-degree angle to the proximal phalanx to get the best pull on the joint, and marking that one. And then same thing for the ring finger. Now this isn't hard yet, so I'd actually have to wait till that hardened to do this. I'm kind of rushing the process a little bit. You see how that's wiggly? So it has to be firm so that when I'm marking the holes, you know, everything is in the same place. Because if this is up or down, that's going to change where that hole is going to be.
So the angle of this, it kind of varies.
It can, yeah. And so, you know, if it's up here, okay, that it might not give me enough length for, you see, but down here it does. So yeah, you have to, you know, you don't want to mark your holes until this is firm and firmly in place. But I'll pretend it is firm so I can continue the process. So say this one's there. Okay. And then I'm going to use a hole punch to punch those holes through. I hope I picked the one that works. Yeah, it worked. So I'm going to let one of you guys put the cuff and line together for these. You can each do one. A little hard to put. Okay. So I'm going to thread this through the hole. And then I can either do static progressive or dynamic. Both are low load, long duration. Generally speaking, we're going to use a static progressive if the contracture is firmer, more long standing, more chronic. And if it's an earlier injury where, especially when there's a little edema component, the dynamic splint may be a better choice. So for static progressive, what I would do is take a piece of Velcro loop, tie a knot in the fishing line, put the line through the Velcro and then pull it back through itself. And then I would just put the matching Velcro hook on the splint so that now she can advance her stretch as she tolerates throughout the course of treatment. So that's static progressive. For the dynamic, I find with the MP joints you need a pretty strong rubber band, and so I've even used those rubber bands that are on the hand helper exercisers to give me a little bit more pull than I can get with a standard rubber band. Let's say it was this, and then I have to anchor it down somewhere. So I'm going to show you an anchor technique that I have been using lately. So I'm calling this Patricia's Post. So what I do, I'm going to use that scissors, is I take and I cut a slit in the bottom of the splint. And then I just heat that. Oh, I helped her turn the heat gun on. And then you can kind of form that into a little post. Not warm enough yet. And that way it can't pull off because it's part of the splint. Hot. Okay. So I would just form that into a little hook. And it'll take a few minutes for that to harden. And I am going to also put another strap over the back of the hand just to stabilize that as well. And there's one more technique that that I've been hearing about, and that was using a bobbin and a sewing machine bobbin, and it was also to create a static progressive pull. This type of static progressive with the Velcro is called soft static progressive because it's not a really firm pull at the end range. And that you can buy these turnbuckle screws that are like a guitar string tightener, but those are expensive and they're kind of hard to apply. So somebody came up with the idea of a sewing bobbin that if you place a sewing bobbin here, you can wrap the line around the bobbin and then secure it with Velcro. And I'm thinking, well, why do you really even need a bobbin? Couldn't you just put a little post of thermoplastic and wrap it around that? I think the reason they use a bobbin is because maybe the line would cut through the thermoplastic. I'm not really sure.
But I'm not sure how would you secure the bobbin.
Well, what they did to secure the bobbin is there's a hole in the middle of the bobbin, right? So you put the thermoplastic up through the hole in the bobbin and put a knob on the end so it can't come off. But let's just try this because I've been dreaming about this. So if I go like this and make it so it can't slip off, so just make a little like that. So why couldn't you just wrap this? It's maybe a little too low. The line isn't long enough. Let's just stick it up there instead. And that could really go anyway. So why couldn't you wrap this and then go down with Velcro, right? So then you can just tighten it, wrap it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Can anybody think of the reason why you would have to use the bobbin? I just can't think of a reason why you have to. I mean, it's the same concept, right?
They use your scraps.
So again, to attach this, you go up through the hole, open your line. That's what I don't like about this line, it's a little thin. And then pull it through there. Okay, so if I come around, once this is hard, wrap it there and then Velcro it down here. It's just a little bit more of a firm pull than the straight Velcro. So it's not something I've used in the clinic yet, but I'm really excited to try it. Okay, and the only difference, and maybe it is not going to work because maybe the bobbin needs to be there. So you would just thread this thermoplastic through the hole in the bobbin and make it so the bobbin can't come off, and that way you can wrap it and then Velcro it down. Okay. The other thing I sometimes do is, this hook isn't hard yet, I'm still waiting for that to harden up. Is sometimes I will do both. So for example, with this one, I've got my static progressive, but I might feel like I want the patient to have both options. So I may also just add a rubber band to the same line like that, and then maybe, they may start with the dynamic or start with the static progressive, add the dynamic, or, so they can alternate and see what works for them. Okay, so this is both static progressive and dynamic with a soft dynamic, a static progressive stretch. This is the true dynamic pull. And then this one is the wraparound pull. And you could even put it up here, So this can anchor down anywhere. So that's for the tight MP joints. Now, if they had tightness of the extensor tendon and you wanted to stretch to the fingertip, right? So you would need that second line of pull on the fingertip. And so the technique that I had been using is just to place a little Velcro loop onto the fingernail and then take the corresponding Velcro hook, attach it to my line, and then I can pull like this. I'd have to punch another hole for that. Or if they didn't have much motion, I might even just pull right down this way, you know, just to get that full composite stretch. One of my students, though, instead of putting the Velcro, she said, my patient didn't like the Velcro loop on their fingernail. And so what she did is she took, and she said this worked great. This is still Velcro hook. I can't find it right now, but what she did is she took a sticky back Velcro loop. So say this is sticky back Velcro loop. And she just would have the patient, when they were wearing the splint, she cut it to the size of their finger. She just put it like this, wrapped it around the finger like that, and then took the hook and hooked it to that. So they could take it on and off and they didn't have to wear it all the time. Okay. So, any questions? Okay, that's good.